Hi everyone, welcome back to Capital Conversation. I'm Charlene Briner and we're talking with State Representative Alice Hausman about the 2010 legislative session. We're talking budgets. In the last segment we were talking, Representative Hausman, about what led up to the final votes on budget bills. The last day of session, finally there was an agreement with the governor and the legislature about how to balance the budget. What was in that bill and how did that ultimately play out?
Well, there were a couple of good things. We did manage to hold education harmless. Now, we've done that for a couple of years, and of course, holding education harmless doesn't necessarily mean they're not feeling it, because there's not an inflationary increase either. We managed to protect nursing homes. Some of the worst cuts, I think, we managed to avoid. But of course, that shift to education is significant. It's so large now, I think there are about 5 different ways that we've sort of borrowed from schools. And granted, we didn't cut. And again, schools have told us they'd rather shift than cut. But this one is now so large, almost $3 billion, that some people assume, unless there's a huge economic recovery, that it could take us 13 or 14 years to repay that. So that is difficult. There was an earlier bill near the end of session that absolutely would have moved us to that early medical assistance that would have then triggered the $1.4 billion of federal funding coming our way. That bill was also vetoed. And so in the final bill, that $1.4 billion, the early medical assistance, was only the potential for this governor opting in. He has said he is not going to. And that I think is this point of view about that he has labeled Obamacare, that he wants no part of, but it means this state loses $1.4 billion of federal money. That would help tremendously as we get ready for next year. There's also an opt-in that the next governor can do. So obviously this gubernatorial election hinges very much on that particular question. Several candidates have already said they would definitely opt in, and others have said they definitely would not. So again, this year links to next year just because of how that bill was written. I subsequently voted no on the final bill, and it is true that we, in that final bill, managed to avoid one more round of difficult cuts to health care, but we did that by shifting even more onto education. And at that point, I thought we didn't, from my perspective, do perhaps enough to balance both health care and education.
And so, I understand those reasons, and they seem really sound. Those objections notwithstanding, the bill did pass.
Yes.
The budget is balanced.
Yes.
I think that it's always important for us to look at the session in total. So Minnesotans do have a balanced budget. There is not a special session, which for good or for bad is something that we won't be dealing with this summer. But there was so much more during the session, and you played such a big role in that, and that was the jobs crisis that we were talking about and doing what state government can do to move us out of that unemployment crisis. You're the chair of the Capital Investment Committee. Talk a little bit about bonding and what you did early in the session.
And I think it is important to focus on the positive. We did end on time, we did get our work done, and that is what the public expects. In my case, I did so much of my work before the session began. We wanted to move so quickly on bonding because we wanted those capital investment dollars out the door so that those building projects could begin and that people could get to work. We wanted to do that not only because of the issue of jobs, but interest rates were low, bids were coming in low for projects, our money would go, so our tax dollars would go so much further. So we worked very hard at the beginning of session, and we moved very quickly to pass a couple of major bills. One was the bonding bill, putting people to work. The other was the other jobs bill that had the angel investment tax credit. Both of those, I think, were seen as important to move quickly just because of the nature of our high unemployment figures. And we begin to see that perhaps that quick movement on those two bills is turning a few things around, because this month the jobless figures seem to be much lower. 10,000 jobs, 10,000 more jobs, I think.
In April, I think, and it's the third month that we've actually added jobs to the economy. So I think you're right. We are seeing that start to turn around.
Now, I was disappointed. There was, it was a $1 billion bonding bill. We thought it was important to be aggressive this year. Over $300 million of it was line item vetoed. There were two, I think, that were particularly disappointing to people. One was RIM, Reinvest in Minnesota, wetland conservation, wetland restoration. And the reason that's regrettable, the $25 million that we had for RIM would have matched $40 million. Initially, we thought $35 million, now $40 million in federal money, and those dollars were left on the table. My fear is, if we didn't do it this year, the federal government has its own problems. We can't assume that federal money will always be there. That was broadly supported by environmental groups, by sportsmen's groups. So I wish we could have gone back near the end to either attempt an override on the RIM veto or to pass a new bill. And then, of course, the other one, the governor vetoed all the money for transit corridors. And I think he did that believing we really would come back for a second one, but as often happens, it's hard to put that second bonding bill together, finding 81 votes. And so we failed to act on a new one that would have restored some of the transit corridor money. Again, all of that transit funding matches federal money. So in a number of areas, I think we failed to get federal dollars that would have helped not only with some of our capital investment, but with our jobs agenda. But I think what we look ahead now to is the nature of the recovery. Everyone has predicted this will be a slow recovery, and they have particularly predicted that there won't be a fast jobs recovery. And so the news this month, I think, is heartening. But as I look ahead, as soon as we finish, we're always looking ahead to the next one. And again, depending on whether we have a bonding-friendly governor, and because there were so many line item vetoes, my hope would be that immediately in January, we could repass those vetoed projects, including RIM, including transit corridors. And the other one that I believe was so regrettable, Minnesota State colleges and universities were greatly affected. Many of their campuses were affected by the line item vetoes. And I felt particularly bad about that because MnSCU had responded to our desire to have these projects ready to go by really working aggressively to make sure that every one of their projects was ready to bid.
Bonding bill and really to get those Minnesotans back to work. Thank you for spending time with us.
It's good to be with you.
We're going to invite you back at the start of the 2011 session, and we'll maybe have a better sense of where you're going from there and if those bonding bills will be on the table.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, and thank you for watching Capitol Conversations. I'm Charlene Briner with State Representative Alice Hausman. We'll see you next year at the start of the 2011 legislative session.